Life comes at you fast in the NBA. One minute you could be on top of the world, winning awards while being praised by fans everywhere, and the next you could be left in the dust if you don't adapt. This appears to be the case with Russell Westbrook, who averaged a healthy triple-double with the Wizards just over a year ago. Despite that, he's likely about to be on his fifth team in 5 years next season. While it's pretty weird to see a player of Westbrook's stature bounce around like a journeyman, I can't say I haven't seen it before. Someone I've always thought Russ was eerily similar to was Allen Iverson. If you take a look at their careers, they have quite similar arcs and have more parallels than people realize. And unfortunately for Russ, that could mean he may be out of the league in the near future. With that being said, today we're going to look at the many similarities between the two and try and figure out what we can expect from Westbrook going forward. Let's get to it. Before we get into the on-the-court parallels, I first wanted to note how Allen Iverson walks so Russell Westbrook could run in terms of NBA fashion. One thing so unique about Iverson was that he was unapologetically himself, and hip-hop culture was a major part of his identity. This led to him shaking up the dynamic of the NBA, ditching business attire for his matching sweatsuits, baggy clothes, and throwback jerseys. The way he dressed began to be emulated by others around the league, and David Stern swiftly implemented a dress code, basically banning Iverson's style as a whole. Despite that, the seeds were planted for players to express themselves through their fashion sense. A few years down the line during the 2012 playoffs, Russell Westbrook went viral for this post-game outfit where he wore a white Lacoste polo with red lensless sunglasses. Even though he caught a lot of heat for it online, Westbrook continued to show off his unique fashion sense, which helped spark a revolution in the NBA. Prior to this, players were dressing like accountants in the tunnel. Fast forward to today, and the pregame tunnel is now essentially a runway where it's almost mandatory for the top players to have a stylish outfit on when entering the arena. It started with Iverson, and then was taken to a totally different level with Westbrook, and the NBA is now the most stylish league in the world because of them. Getting into the on-the-court similarities, let's start with their early years. Both Iverson and Westbrook were touted as highly talented young players who had major issues as lead guards. Allen Iverson hit the ground running during his first season, proving he was an elite scorer by averaging 23 points a night and winning Rookie of the Year. By his third season, he won the scoring title and led Philly back to the playoffs. While a resume like this would usually garner unanimous praise, Iverson was one of the most scrutinized players in the league, as he was perceived as selfish and unprofessional for chucking shots and butting heads with head coach Larry Brown. So even though he was clearly one of the most talented players in the league, he had a horrible reputation and was often shopped in trade talks. Now let's take a look at Westbrook, who made waves during his younger years playing alongside Kevin Durant in Oklahoma City. They quickly put the league on notice in 2010, taking the eventual champion LA Lakers to a competitive 6-game series in the first round of the playoffs. 2 years later, Russ and KD led the Thunder all the way to the finals, taking down the Mavs, Lakers, and Spurs to show that they have arrived as the top dog in the West. It was at this point where Russell started to receive heavy criticism for being out of control and not being the right fit alongside Kevin Durant. Magic Johnson famously criticized Russ after Game 2 of the finals, saying it was the worst performance he's ever seen by a guard on the championship stage. So despite being an all-star point guard for a championship contender at the age of 23, Westbrook, like Iverson, was one of the most scrutinized players in the league. After years of this criticism, both players reached a breaking point that led to them having iconic MVP seasons that briefly changed their narratives. Starting with Iverson's 2001 campaign, a trade was actually agreed upon in the summer of 2000 that sent him to the Pistons, but Sixers center Matt Geiger refused to waive a $1.2 million trade kicker required to complete the deal. Without Geiger in the package, the teams couldn't make the salaries work and the trade fell through. This was exactly the wake-up call that Allen needed, as it showed him that he needed to get on the same page with his coach and buy into his system if he wanted to remain in Philly. After coming into the season with a new focus and dedication to the Sixers, Iverson was once again the top scorer in the league with 31.1 points a night and led Philly to the top seed in the East, shouldering almost the entire load on offense. They ended up making it all the way to the finals that year, which was incredible because their success was something that nobody expected. It was on the final stage where we saw the most iconic performance of Iverson's career. Heading into the series as a heavy underdog against the Lakers, who won 11 straight playoff games, AI dropped 48 points and stepped over Tyronn Lue to secure the Game 1 victory. The Sixers would go on to lose the next 4, but that didn't matter. AI showed the season that he finally took the game seriously and bought into winning, which is exactly what the people wanted. Heading into the season, he was villain number 1 in the NBA, but after its conclusion, he was praised as a trendsetter and an ultimate underdog. Moving on to the 2017 season, Russell Westbrook was now on his own in OKC, as Kevin Durant infamously left him for the Golden State Warriors after blowing a 3-1 lead to them in the Western Conference Finals the season prior. After Durant ditched the Thunder, many expected Westbrook to demand a trade since it didn't look like this roster had any chance of competing without the 4-time scoring champ. But as a surprise to us all, Russ re-signed with the Thunder a few weeks later, saying that loyalty is something that he stands by, and there was nowhere else that he'd rather be. Once he re-signed, the Thunder were expected to be a fringe playoff team with Westbrook putting up monster numbers in the process. But Russ's season ended up being far crazier than anything we could have imagined. Not only did he drag the Thunder to 47 wins and a respectable 6th seed in the West, but he did it while averaging a 30-point triple-double. While the triple-double stat has become watered down a bit in recent years, back in 2017, nobody ever expected anyone to ever average a triple-double again after Oscar Robertson did it back in 1962. It was in the same vein as Wilt's 100-point game, so when Westbrook did the unthinkable, it won him the 2017 MVP. And with the award, his criticism for being a poor decision maker and shot happy briefly turned into praise for willingness to do whatever it takes to win. Looking back at 01 and 2017, you can see that AI and Russ both went on legendary individual runs, which led to them being universally praised for the first time in their careers. However, in the seasons following their MVP campaigns, both players continued to record incredible numbers, but a series of early playoff exits led to the two once again receiving the same scrutiny they got in years past. From 2002 to 2006, Allen Iverson led the league in scoring 2 more times, but the Sixers couldn't get back to the finals. In fact, they never even got out of the second round and missed the playoffs twice during this span. And in 2018 and 19, Westbrook continued to average a triple-double, but the Thunder had back-to-back disappointing playoff exits in the first round. Whether they deserved this label or not, it's at this point in their career where it became universally agreed upon that you couldn't win with these guys leading your team. As a result, they both became journeymen, as Iverson and Westbrook ended up being traded from their teams to awkwardly join other superstars. AI was traded to the Nuggets in December of 2006 to join Carmelo Anthony, who was the leading scorer in the NBA at the time. During his 2 seasons in Denver, Allen averaged about 25 points a night and made 2 All-Star appearances, but Denver ultimately moved on from him, electing to take a more traditional point guard in Chauncey Billups to help get easier looks for Melo. He then bounced around from Detroit to Memphis before ultimately coming back to the Sixers, where he anticlimactically ended his career. More on that in a moment. Once again, Westbrook followed a very similar path that AI did. After the 2019 season, the Thunder moved on from Westbrook and traded him to the Rockets to pair him with James Harden, who was the NBA's leading scorer at the time, just like Melo. During his lone season in Houston, Russ averaged 27 points a game on career-high efficiency, but the fit was just flat-out strange. The Rockets' 5-game beatdown at the hands of the Lakers in the second round of the 2020 playoffs showed that a player like Chris Paul was unsurprisingly a better fit around Harden, resulting in Houston deciding to send Westbrook to the Wizards in exchange for John Wall. In Washington, he quietly had an incredible second half of the year to yet again average a triple-double, and then force his trips to LA to team up with LeBron and Anthony Davis. And we all know the disaster that ended up being. This team with championship aspirations failed to make the playoffs, and Westbrook arguably received more scrutiny than anyone for it, as his lowlights and issues with head coach Frank Vogel were headlines throughout the entire season. So when we zoom out and look at Russ's career to this point, he quickly became a superstar and fashion icon in his early years, but was heavily scrutinized for his inability to get others involved and perceived selfishness. After years of being viewed as the problem, he suddenly became a fan favorite thanks to a historic MVP season. From there, he continued to put up great numbers, but has bounced around the league since it hasn't translated to winning. Reminds you of somebody? With all of these similarities, I'm really curious to see how the rest of Westbrook's career ends up panning out. Iverson made it abundantly clear that he had no interest in coming off the bench under any circumstances.
I don't know any Olympian to come off the bench. I don't know any All-Star to come off the bench. I don't know any former MVP to come off the bench. I don't know any 3-time scoring champion to come off the bench. I don't know any first-team All-NBA to come off the bench. Why Allen Iverson?
In fact, he chose to play his last professional season as a starter in Turkey instead of being a role player in the NBA. It was clear that when it came to play style, it was his way or the highway, and he was adamant against adjusting his game in order to extend his playing career. Unfortunately, this is something that I can definitely see happening to Westbrook in the near future. After his disastrous season in LA, reports are coming out that teams around the league no longer view Russ as an impactful player. It isn't because he's some scrub and can no longer play, it's because he doesn't seem to be willing to adjust his game. Westbrook thrived during his heyday with the ball in his hands controlling every aspect of the offense. As he continues to age and his athleticism wanes, he won't be able to get in the lane to attack the rim and find open shooters like he has in years past to justify such a high usage rate. Despite this, last season showed that he doesn't seem to have any interest in playing in a system that isn't predicated around him, which is becoming a major issue for his stock around the league. When former stars don't learn how to adjust to a lesser role, teams will find someone to take their place, as seen with Iverson, who played himself right out of the league with the same mentality that Russ has today. Now, I'm not guaranteeing that his career is about to come to an immediate end, but if he doesn't learn to accept a smaller role, I won't be the slightest bit surprised if Russ has trouble finding a team to play on in the next couple of seasons. So what do you guys think? Do you think that Westbrook will end up like Iverson and have an abrupt ending to his NBA career? Or do you think that he'll carve out a position as a role player somewhere as the years go along? Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you guys next time.